University.
Pranam Swamiji. On the outset, let me thank the organizers, Vishnu Mohan Foundation, for this invitation. I met Swamiji couple of months ago in Kuala Lumpur, and he said that he invited me then. In fact, this is my first trip after the COVID lockdown. And the last, when I came, I also attended. I'm not sure whether it was 202 or 201. The peace conference here. Okay, so it's good to be back after several years. Okay, my name is Ravi. I teach international security studies for many years, prior to my university appointment, I was in the same cadre of Mr. Saravanan here. We call the Administrative and Diplomatic Service. But after a couple of years, I left to join the academia. So I've been dealing with conflict issues since I joined the Diplomatic Institute in 1996. From then onwards, it's all about conflict. All right? So I teach many courses on defense, on security studies at the university. Okay, there are a few things that I would like to share into three parts. The first is actually some reflection. This one? All right. Some reflection about what I heard today. It's quite interesting. I've been listening from morning and also from yesterday itself on some of the concept, or rather some of the issues that has been discussed by the speakers in terms of diplomacy, all right? And one of the good questions, I think it was the first speaker who said that, is diplomacy has love in it, all right? So that we have to ask Mr. Saravanan, who is a diplomat, okay? Now, interestingly, diplomacy, when we talk about diplomacy, we're talking about interstate relations. Interstate relations, primarily it's about interests, all right? So when we talk about interests, it's talk about state interests, all right? Interests between countries. But having said that, interest is also emerged from the concept of value systems. So over the years, the international community has developed certain norms and practices, norms and value system to manage interstate relations. One of it that one of the earlier speaker mentioned about war and the concept of just war, all right? What is the concept of just war? The concept of just war is basically about ethics of war that came about in the aftermath of the Second World War, all right? So the thinkers of the United Nations, at the time the League of Nations, they were thinking, hey, look here, all right? Second World War is the most destructive war of mankind. How can we manage? How can we stop war, or rather states from waging war, all right? And we know that the concept of state or nation states states that the war is a prerogative of the state. So it is legal, all right? You see, I cannot wage war, or you cannot wage war, because you are not an actor of international relations. Even you are an actor of international relations, only the state has the right to wage war. Of course, terrorist organization, they can, they call it war on terror, but in actual definition, it's not a war on terror, because they are not state. So it is very interesting, all right? The nature of state, all right? The behavior of state suggests that me and myself, self-help, it is my interest, all right? So I can have what we call dual moral reasoning, one morality for me, one morality for you. One ethics for me, one ethics for you. That's the reason, like in the United States, they can talk about the Patriot Act. It's about human rights and all that, but sometimes they do not practice it elsewhere, okay? So it is quite common, and it is accepted in international relations, okay? So has diplomacy has love? Yes and no, all right? How you want to look at it, all right? All right. The second point, I think was given by one of the speakers, is about education and the power to transform. I think this is the core, trajectory of peace education, is through education, all right? All right. How do you want to bring about change? It's about transforming ideas. It's about transforming behaviors, right? And that we can achieve by way of education. all right? Why the states, think that they have the right to do all this, all right? Aggression, all right? The right of aggression on hostility is because somewhere in Europe, during the war in Europe, there was a treaty called the Treaty of Westphalia, and in the Treaty of Westphalia, they said that this is the birth of nation states, all right? They said states are the supreme actors of international relations. Nothing is above the state, all right? So therefore, they can do anything. But of course, over the years, countries, through United Nations or through regional organizations, they have come up with what we call the norms and practices, all right? They have, instilled, like for example, if you are in ASEAN, ASEAN is the 10-member nation that we come from. Malaysia is one of the members of ASEAN in Southeast Asia. We have what we call TAC, Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. If you want to be my friend, India, if you want to be my friend, you have to agree to this TAC, Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, all right? And they have certain, all right, principles within the treaty. Amity is peace. So there are international systems and norms which are available in order to regulate relations, all right? But having said that, it doesn't prevent war. It makes it a bit more difficult to go to war, because now you have to justify, under the just war doctrine, you have to justify why you want to go to war. You must also mention that you have already exhausted all peaceful means of reconciliation or conflict resolution, all right? Only then you go. Even if during war, all right? During war, you cannot have arbitrary violence. You must have targeted. You must need to have war objectives. You must have certain objectives. Once you achieve that objectives, you must stop. Okay? Then after that, what do you do after the war? After the war, you cannot simply leave. You have to be there and help in the reconciliation, rebuilding process. So you have to spend more money. So therefore, the whole idea of a just war doctrine is to make it difficult for people to engage in violence, in aggression, number one. Number two, it becomes more expensive, all right? So many countries follow these principles, all right? But having said that, there are also other considerations, like for example, the war in Gaza. This is a war of the Abrahamic tradition, okay? This is the problem of the Abrahamic traditions. Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and we know about this, right? The 70-year-old problem, or even earlier than that, okay? So how to manage this? Because now it is biblical, it is Abrahamic in nature. It becomes very difficult. Even nation states cannot handle this, okay? So that's another issue, okay? So I think I better start talking about my presentation. Okay, now I'll go to my presentation now. Okay, I would like to speak to you about basically about conflict resolution and bioethics. This is about rethinking peaceful curriculum. This is a paper I wrote, myself and Dr. Siva are here as well, and another colleague of mine, Dr. Sarjit, Professor Sarjit. We wrote a paper which was published in a journal called Sustainability, a Swiss journal called Sustainability a few years back, about how are we going to look at peace education, right? What are the problems and all that. So if you're interested, I can share the paper with you. And this paper is about conflict resolution and bioethics, because I'm also in the field of bioethics, all right? And how we can use this in order for us to relook at the peace curriculum. But the case study was actually in Malaysia. Next, please. Okay. All right. We'll start with this conflict map, all right? So I got it this morning. I was looking in the internet, what shall I show you? So this is a map, very interesting map. As you can see here, all right, almost all countries in the world have some level of conflict, some kind of conflict. As what we say in international relations, as long as you have borders, you'll have border conflict, all right? You will have border conflict. It may be small conflict or big conflict, all right? It can be land borders, it can be maritime borders, and also it can be air. They call it Air Defense Identification Zone. If you are flying in the Straits of Taiwan, you'll get a call. You know, they said you have entered the airspace of China. All right? A friend of mine who's a pilot, he flies one, what do you call that, airline in Singapore, sorry, in Taiwan. And you know, every time you know, they fly through in international waters, China will say that you are now entering Chinese airspace. Okay? So this is, even air is contested, all right? The conflict in air. So everywhere is here. Where is India? So India is, the level is too small here, but it is there, all right? The darker the thing, the red is where most of the conflict is, more violent conflicts. So when you look at all the other countries, they will have some level of conflict. This is the data. It may be not 100% accurate, but this is based on a survey done this year. Okay. All right. Now, when we talk about conflict, it's a bit slow, I think, the distance. All right, it's between order and chaos, okay? It's between order and chaos. In international relations, we call it security dilemma. Whenever you have a problem between states, there is always a dilemma, all right? Security dilemma. All right, it's all because of dissatisfaction, hatred, all right? You know, and that contributes to what we call divide in individuals, in societies, between ethnic groups, all right, between countries, all right? Malaysia and Pakistan, sorry, India and Pakistan have a lot of border problems, all right? You have not settled that particular problem, all right? There's a high level of hostility. Every time I go to India, sorry, I go to Pakistan, you know, the immigration will ask you, okay, who are you? Okay, you look Indian, okay. They are more interested, why in my passport that I've been to India. All right? They are not interested why I'm coming there. They said, oh, you have been to India. Okay, all right, fine. Why did you go there? What do you want to do there for? What are you doing? All right? What are you doing? You know, this kind of stuff. All right? Of course, when I come to, what do you call that, sometimes coming into India, they also will check. They say, oh, you've been to Pakistan. What are you doing? They're more interested on that. You see, at that level, you can see the kind of hostility and the fear, all right, the fear, all right, you see, so this is a perception. It may be not real, but it can be a perception. In international relation, perception of threat is as real as threat itself. You feel threatened, that's it, you will take certain action. All right, having said that, social tensions leads to social conflict. When the tensions are not mitigated or managed or resolved, then you have problems, all right? Now, any society, multi-ethnic society, even in India, I've been watching the videos, you know, even in Malaysia, as what Mr. Saravanan mentioned, about the 3R issue. In Malaysia at the moment, the sensitivity, because of the social media, everybody can post anything. Everything they post. Some of the posts is actually very provocative, right? They, you know, it's about religious, it's about religion, especially Islam, other faith system in Malaysia. It's about ethnicity, all right? It's about, also they attack the royalty now, right? The royalty also they attack. So therefore, there's a lot of issues. Issues of, in Malaysia now, issues of conversion. People go to court, you know, unilateral conversion. You convert to one religion, you can convert your children without the consent of the spouses, all right? So all this is messy. And when you have an ideological and religious issue at the back, it becomes so messy, right? It becomes so messy because we cannot think clearly when, you know, when you have the mindset of religiosity behind. Okay, so negative belief and attitude can manifest in the form of hatred, intolerance, stereotyping, stigmatizing, and also the fear of others. All right, we have seen. All right, that I also said, and like for example in Malaysia, it may not be 100% true. I'm not a diplomat, so I can say a bit more. All right, when you see an Indian, they will see that most likely you are a gangster or you are trying to rob. You know, that thing, because in a way through also, I mean now it is not as bad, but gangsterism, Indians were much involved in that, okay? So, these are some of the problems that we find, okay? The present, the conflict resolution methodologies are quite less effective, and therefore, this is our suggestion, myself and Siva. Okay. Now, before I go to this one, I just wanted to talk to you about the ethnicity and religiosity nexus. This is very important. When we talk about international relations, at the moment in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, probably in India as well, there is an important nexus between ethnicity and religion, all right? And that is a major problem. It can also be others. It can be linguistic determinant. It can be language as well, okay? Number one, what is ethnicity, all right? So ethnic is basically a quality and affiliation resulting from racial or cultural ties. Myself and Saravanan, we are both Indians, right? Or all of you, all right? I may be of different nationality, but my origin is South Asian. Am I right? Parents came from South India, okay? So number two is shared, because of that racial and cultural ties, we have some learned standards of behavior, some shared value systems, am I right? Social ties referenced by common origin, memories of historical past, all right? Like the Jews, they have a memory of the Holocaust, wherever they are in Europe, in other parts of the world. It's a shared historical past, shared cultural heritage, food, attire, religious affiliation, language, dialect, and all that. Now, that's one aspect, shared knowledge. The second aspect is more hardened and strengthened, which is what we call the primordialist instinct. Primordialist instinct is blood relations, okay? Like, for example, the Arabs, for them, the asabiya, the what do you call that? If I'm not mistaken, that's a concept called asabiya. Blood relation is very important, all right? Loyalty is very important, okay? Ummah, all right? Because of you come from the same religion is very important. So therefore, the primordialists come into play. Race, physical features. Like in Rwanda, you know, there was problems of the Hutus and the Tutsis, and they were killing each other. But both they look the same. Then I asked one African friend from Nigeria, I say, hey, you guys look the same. Same skin color, same this one. How do you differentiate? He said, the size of the nose. All right? So before you slash somebody, you look at the nose. Ah, okay, you are definitely. So it's quite interesting. All right? Let me see. Go back to this again. All right. So these are basically physical features, language, religion, customs, all related to predisposition acquired by birth. And this is over centuries, right? Developed over centuries. So ethnicity has a strong influence on community status relation. What does that mean is, I will now look at myself, my community, and compare it with the others. I am getting 5 apples, that guy is getting 10 apples. But we are of the same nationality. We live in the same area. So therefore, you have certain policies which are discriminatory, oppressive. I cannot vote, he can vote, like the Rohingyas, right? They are there in the Rakhine state for many years, but the Myanmar people do not recognize them as inhabitants. So therefore, there are certain periods of time they were not allowed to procreate, or rather they have to register their marriage. There are a number of children they have to register. They also did not have the right to vote, like for example. And no protection, or less protection of law, right, within the state. So therefore, you don't have the protection, okay? So ethnicity, so what is the effable significance is beyond rational reflection, meaning because you have that relations, because you belong to a particular community or a particular thing, therefore you will take action beyond rationality, beyond justice. All right, the fellow has done something wrong, I will still protect him because he's from my village, or all right, this kind of what do you call the mentality. So ethnic conflicts are basically tension between primordial sentiment and civic politics. All right, civic politics, you are talking about justice. You are talking, a lot of word justice has been used these past few days. All right, peace and justice, which is very important. Okay, so shaping of group identity Now I interpret my own identity with, no, compared to the others. So that is, you feel you're internally colonized, all right? Not by a colonial master, but also by other ethnic groups. Who you perceive is oppressing you, all right? Okay. So this is the nexus I wanted. Okay, now, the next one. Okay, where are we? Okay, the peace curriculum in schools, all right? So my argument, or rather myself and Siva, we have this argument, we say that all faith system and also the school curriculum has some degree of the notion of peaceful existence, love, compassion, real world, okay? Like for example, in Malaysia, all the students, they need to study a subject called moral, all right? And they have 36 values, and they have to memorize those values. And I look at it, I say, I cannot memorize more than 3 values, all right? Okay. All right, so, but the real life situation is abysmal. I mean, it's not there, and you have seen in many multi-ethnic societies. So the conventional approach of managing social conflict, okay, has primarily utilized 2 objects. One is a material and ideational approach. The material approach says, okay, or rather suggests, that conflict occurs, okay, when systemic expression of inequality among groups, okay, in society, and that is the expression. I mean, that will negatively impact the group dynamics, all right? They feel oppressed. They feel marginalized, okay, that's point number 1. The ideational approach suggests something else. The ideational approach talks about moral education, civic education, okay? And also, in many countries, religious inculcation through formal or informal education. In Malaysia, we have the Hafiz schools, right? We also have Islamic education in the school system as well. All right, so that is our this one. So what's the problem? Is it okay? All right. So the argument is, both of these approaches are less effective in providing credible platform for peace and harmony. So therefore, all right, in response, in the paper, we have what you call that offered, that integration of what we call the bioethics principle and value-based education principle into the education curriculum, for the purpose of how can a naturalistic and altruistic logic of bioethics enhance divine and also human-centric. So this is the argument. We look at what we have done. Huh? All right, let me see now. All right, what is the proposition? Okay, the proposition here, by integrating this principle, bioethics principle as 4 important principles. There are many, I'm just taking the basic 4, which is the principle of autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice. And when you merge it together with a value-based education, now learners can internalize the values of social cohesion. I think one of the previous group mentioned about this a lot. Okay, tolerance, and reflect on those values in their learning experience. So it is basically about experiential learning. Okay, so value-based education is to make learners aware of the world. All right, consists of community, independent nation, and survival, well-being, and all that. And this also has to do with Vivekananda's concept of education. Bioethics principle combined amplifies the expression of the values. Amplifies the expression of these values promoted by these 2, which is value-based education, and in turn motivates the learners to change from social conflict to social cohesion. That's what the objective, right? So what is social cohesion? Social cohesion enables individuals and groups to develop social bonds and societal peace ownership. Okay, so this is what our proposition, this is what we want to do. All right, 1 and 2. This is. Do I have more time? 5 more minutes. Okay. All right. Slowly. All right. Just before I go to the expression of values, just want to introduce bioethics. I also have my self-interest in introducing this. I was involved in this movement called bioethics when I was working for the Ministry of Science. I think Mr. Saravanan also worked in that place before, the Ministry of Science. So I was involved in the bioethics framework, UNESCO's bioethics framework in that time. All right, and from there until now, I'm also involved. I was the president of the Bioethics Association for several years. It was only for 2 years, but it was extended to 5-6 years, not because they liked my presidentship, because it was COVID. Nobody couldn't do anything. So they said, no, you stay on for another few years. So the bioethics principle came about from a Christian tradition, all right? And it dealt with medical ethics, medical bioethics at point of war. When you have limited resources, now doctors and medical practitioners will now have to decide who to give, all right? What is the justification, all right? Who do you give? Do you give to an elderly or you give to a young person, all right? So it came about from there, and they developed the principles. 4 principles are autonomy meaning decision making, all right? Non-maleficent, don't do bad, all right? Beneficent, do good, and justice, all right? Now, bioethics principle, we believe, can provide a naturalistic as well as altruistic moral reasoning. So whenever we talk about bioethics, it's not about right or wrong, it's about how you make the decision, yes or no, which is based on the idea of reasoning, moral reasoning. Okay? Okay, this is what we have done. Okay, now based on the value-based education, just want to show you, the first diagram, we say the existing value-based education. So you have civic education, religious ethics, existing value, then you have, but it contributes to social negativity, social conflict, okay? So what the second diagram we suggest, we say that enhance the civic education, we bring in the bioethics principle, then at an end point we are looking for social positivity, all right? So this model has to be tested, all right? This is what do you call that, an academic review model. We are testing it at this point of time. Okay, next one. Okay, I think this is my last slide. I have another few more, but it's okay. So what I'm trying to say here, you have these 4 principles, then you have value education, value-based education, and this is what? A value enhancement. Like you have autonomy, you have the concept of respect, courage, optimism, cooperation, action, comes from the value base. So what do you have? You have value enhancement, ability to show respect to others and express opinion. Courage to move from comfort zone and express opinion, right? I believe that Indian students are very vocal. I have a military guy in the MPAT course, defense, all right, and he's very vocal. Whenever I ask him a question, you won't stop talking, all right? I say, what do you think of China? He has a lot of things to say about China. What do you think about Modi? He has a lot of things to say about Modi, right? Interesting personality, all right? So these are the expression, all right? Believe that problem can be managed and solved, all right? And there is always a silver lining, the kind of stuff. And it goes like that, do no harm, honesty, tolerance, the second non-maleficent. Internalizing the principle of do no harm to others. Positive moral character, such as integrity, sincerity, all right? Transparency, truthfulness, trustworthiness, straightforwardness, all right? So I think these are the expression of values that we can achieve by way of changing our ideas to not only looking at just moral education, but also to incorporate these values of bioethics values into a value-based education, okay? Like for example, and we also emphasize on the idea of experiential learning. Like for example, many of these values can be taught, like for example, water security, all right? Water security, water ethics, like for example, sharing of resources, what do you call that, safeguarding your riverine, your river resources. In fact, I first met Mr. Saravanan in Vientiane, in Laos, because I was there with another colleague, or 2 colleagues of mine. we were doing research on water security. We were not, the water flows, the Mekong River flows from China to another 5 more countries and empties itself in South China Sea in Vietnam. So we were looking at how countries, what are the conflict problems between countries, all right? How China can turn on the tap and turn off the tap. If they turn on the tap during, rainy season, you have flooding, all right? You have flooding in the delta in Vietnam. Or during drought season, they want more water, they will turn off the tap and what do you have? You have desalination. Sea water goes into the paddy fields in Vietnam, okay? So how are they going to manage this? So these are conflict as regard to water security, water conflict. India also has it, all right? You have Afghanistan and Pakistan also have it. I have a PhD student from Pakistan working on that, the Kabul River. So when resources flow in many countries, you have all sorts of dynamics. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.